Hello you beautiful people and welcome to today's video. So I am sharing the books that I read in June and giving you some thoughts and feelings about them. So let's get started. The first book I read was audio and it was the Thursday Murder Club, which is the first book in the Thursday Murder Club series by Richard Osman. So this one is set in a peaceful retirement village with four unlikely friends who meet up once a week to investigate unsolved cold case murders. But when a brutal killing actually takes place on their very doorstep, the Thursday Murder Club find themselves in the middle of their very first live case. So I really saw the charm with this one, but the hype, maybe overhype, got lost on me, unfortunately. I am wanting to see the TV show, and a lot of people at work are really like rooting for this book and are excited for the release. So that's why I was like, let me just read the book now so that I can also get on the bandwagon. There's some great actors in it that I typically really enjoy in what they've done so far, but to read it just wasn't as exciting as I was expecting it to be with all the hype that has been in my head. I did listen to this one. I thought the narrator was very expressive and helped me to feel immersed into the story itself, but I just didn't care for the unfolding of the tale really, or the characters all the way. Like I wasn't 100% in. I think I would feel more hooked, honestly, just watching the plot unfold via the TV show. So we shall see. I do believe it's coming out in August at some point, and I ended up giving that one a 3 out of 5 stars. Next up is The Knowing by Emma Hinz, which I gave a 3.5 out of 5 stars. So this is set in the 19th century slums of New York. We have a tattooed mystic called Flora who is fighting for her life. Her survival hangs on her talent in tarot reading, and there's also an element of circus culture embedded within this story as well. So I would say this story was super solid yet moving, but what really made the tale more memorable for me and kept me reading and wanting to turn the page was the characters that we meet. The relationships were often incredibly complex and toxic, and I found myself not always loving how Flora, our main character, was being treated, but I can't deny the love she felt for a character called Minnie and others that she met. And it really just highlighted how important relationships were in a world where you need to kind of keep any connection you can to survive, even if it's not always favourable. And I think a lot of that still rings true in elements of the modern day. The Knowing was super atmospheric in tone from start to finish, maybe slowing down a little bit too much for my liking in some parts. Overall, it was in keeping with a lovely pace. It was very Moorish, very page-turnery. It blends in multiple murder mysteries, buried memories and spiritualism, and the historical setting of it being in 19th century New York slums added this rich layer to it, as well as, you know, incorporating the prejudices of the time, which I think helped crafted some of the story's outcomes. But yeah, overall I really did enjoy this one. There were times I thought it was going to be an absolute like knockout 5 stars, and other times where I was like, okay, it's not as strong a rating as I expected, but I can't deny that overall I had a really good time reading this book. The next book I read was a graphic novel. It's a standalone one. It's called The Neighbours by Jude Ellison S. Doyle. So it's described as a small town terror where things are not as they seem. When Janet and Oliver Godey move to a quaint mountain town, their teenage daughter Casey and 2-year-old daughter Isabel become part of a horrific chain of events that will forever change their family. It's impossible to know who to trust or who is still human. I know. I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars. Let's get into the thoughts of the matter. So The Neighbours was so good. I'm really glad that I read it. It reminded me of a blend of the 2 comics, The Nice House on the Lake and Something is Killing the Children. It was super dark and creepy and left me wanting to know more about the dark entity at the house, or just at this new like quaint town village that the family moved to. And overall I'm definitely left wanting to read more, but it's over now, it's done, and I did enjoy it. Moving on to another graphic novel, I have I actually have the second volume here, but I'm talking about the first volume because that's the one I read and I've returned to the library since. But it's The Wicked and the Divine, Volume 1, The False Act by Kieran Gillen. And every 90 years, 12 gods incarnate as humans. They're loved, they're hated. In 2 years, they are dead. This was actually a reread for me. I originally read it back when it released, like back in the day, and I didn't like it back then. I think I gave it a 1 out of 5 stars. This time round I enjoyed it a little bit more and I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. I found the plot to be underdeveloped and a bit convoluted, with no real explanation as to what was going on, who was who, and why things were going on the way they were. But I definitely say that I enjoyed this a lot more this time round. I found myself laughing and reacting more to explosive scenes, and I did appreciate the broad spectrum of cultural deities and mythology. Same as before, I found the art style to really be the best thing about it. In terms of story, although I found myself understanding the point a little bit more this time round, I still think it was giving, you know, style over substance the same. I definitely do intend on picking up volume 2, and pretty soon. It might be one of my next reads, I think. I have another graphic novel that I read this month, and this one was a memoir, which was Escape from St. Hell, My Trans Teen Life Levels Up by Lewis Hancock. This one I gave a 5 stars. It's the follow-up story of Lewis coming into his own as a trans man and just figuring life out outside of where he grew up in his small town. So this was brilliant. Lewis has such a way of sharing his story that makes it entertaining yet still filled with genuine emotion. It was honestly just a brilliant follow-up to him becoming happy within himself. The next one is another graphic novel and it's called I Shall Never Fall in Love by Harry Connor, which I gave a 4 out of 5 stars. So the story is inspired by Jane Austen and queer history. And the concept is to shine a light on what it means to be true to yourself and rewrites the rules for what makes a happily ever after. This is such a chilled, queer Regency era coming of age story with the focus on identity, self-expression and romance. It's a very tranquil story for the most part, but we do have really intense characters and believable life experiences shown in all its varied forms of beauty. I've got to say, as our main protagonist, I found Ellie to be insufferable. She was mean to her friends and bigoted to boot. I did adore her redemption arc to become a better ally to the queer and BIPOC community, as well as the self-reflecting stage on her own identity. But I just can't get over, I guess I hold grudges, I don't know, I can't get over how mean-spirited, petty and jealous she was for the majority of this book, which was shocking to read. Honestly, I wasn't expecting that because she seemed so nice from the beginning, and then yeah, as soon as the tensions weren't on her, the tone just shifted and the mood soured. George and Charlotte were definitely my favourite characters out of the whole cast. They were both so passionate and stood up for what they believed in, and they're such rounded individuals. It was interesting to see the experience of a trans person in this setting through George, and of a black woman in Charlotte, and how they both faced prejudice in different ways. I loved the resources the author added at the end of the story, and also appreciated the extensive research that they did to make this graphic novel all that it is. Oh, it is so hot in here, like I'm sweating out, and I'm also drinking my tea, which is probably not helping, but they do say tea cools you down. I guess it's that rush of heat that just in contrast makes you feel cool after it's dissipated, right? But yeah, it's just, I keep taking breaks because I am sweating. This is the room that doesn't have the window open either, because it's my library, right? And I've got I don't want things coming in here. That sounds really bad. There's no animals in here now, so I don't need to keep it circulated with air. Elsa comes and goes. She doesn't need to be in this room if she doesn't want to be. And also I've got like pictures and stuff leaning against the window, so I need to move it around. I need to find a better way. I just need to do this room, which I've been procrastinating now since the first wave of when I moved in, like over a year and a half ago now. Anyway, I digress. Let's continue on with the books that I read. The next one was an audiobook, and this was The Quiet Librarian by Alan Eskens, which I gave a 4.5 out of 5 stars. After the murder of her best friend, a librarian's search for answers leads back to her own dark secrets in this sweeping novel about a woman transformed by war, family, vengeance, and love. I don't know what I was expecting going into this one. But it was such a moving story. It was drawing from a real war, like a real experience that happened, that basically saw Muslims of Bosnia prosecuted for their faith, with Serbians setting out to ethnically cleanse the land. It's a piece of history I hadn't had any education on, and despite this story itself being fictional, the context it draws from left me with information I hadn't previously had. Falling back into the fictional narrative, present day Noura's storyline was steeped in mystery and more of a slower unfolding of action than the life of young Noura, but having that back and forth between the timelines really helped to put in place how events that had transpired affected the present moment, the mentality, the state of being, and almost, you know, the way of living, how she moved in life now from what had happened before, you know, which is totally understandable. This was, don't get me wrong, a really hard book with devastating war crimes not shying away from the page, and some awful events actively, like, you're actively reading it, so you know, check your trigger warnings. But it was handled really well. It had an exciting and an engaging story with a main character I was rooting for. It depicts a genocide and just a period of history I hadn't known about, yet is frighteningly only within the last 30 or so years ago, so it's very modern history, right? I thought it was a fantastic book. Definitely pick it up. The next couple of books are about faith. The first of those two books is a kids book about Judaism by M.M. Friedman. I love the a kids book about books. Oh my god, that's so difficult to say. This one I gave a 5 out of 5 stars. I had a class visit planned to come into the library, and this was their class topic that they wanted us to kind of have books, you know, easily accessible for. So before sending off the books back to their home libraries, I thought I'd read some of them to deepen my limited understanding and broaden my education on this particular faith. And honestly, it was really simple, lovely little introduction to this faith, and as I say, I do really like this series. I also read through Judaism by Anita Ganeri, which I gave a 4 stars. It's an older printed children's non-fiction book, but the format of these ones are quality. I feel like we had these kind of books, I can't remember the publisher, back when I was in school, and it's just, the layout is like pleasing and easy for my brain. I quite like them, so it's a little bit of a nostalgia kick, I guess. But yeah, it's really easy to consume, and the meanings bounce off nicely into the next like segment of information that it gives you. To a cutesy little book. This one was The Hidden World of Magical Creatures by Maz Evans, and I really felt like I'd read this one before. It bears a resemblance to a book that I've since found the title of, called The Hidden World of Magical Folk, and can you guess, it bears resemblance because it's by the same author. It wasn't coming up in the bibliography though. I was searching, I was like, I swear it must be the same author. What's going on? And then like suddenly it popped up like, yes, they also wrote this book, and I was like, okay, so that's why it sounds similar. It was sweet. I do really love books like this, and I enjoy the illustrations and the folkloriness, and it just feels like you've tapped into all secret knowledge of magical folklore that, you know, it's been passed down, and you're now the keeper of the legends, right? But I just felt like the wording of the context just felt robotic, and it didn't flow properly, which is at odds with what the blurb calls it as humorously told, because it wasn't humorously told. It felt stiff and weird, and like the words weren't correctly chosen for that specific meaning. It was weirdly written, in my opinion. Okay, on to the last 2 books now. One I quite enjoyed, and another I'm pretty disappointed in. So the first of those 2 is Hemlock Island by Kelly Armstrong. When Lainey shows up to investigate Hemlock Island, it's her private retreat. She's renting it out to be able to continue paying for it, but she's been finding some strange and sinister things show up on the island when no one's supposed to be there. She shows up with her teenage niece and discovers that her ex Kit has also been informed and is there with his sister, which is Lainey's former best friend. Then another ex-best friend comes over with her brother, who's now a cop. And that sounded so convoluted, even just saying that. They're like, why are all these random people just showing up? But it builds a picture, and it makes sense in the long run, right? So there are tensions and secrets, there's whispers in the woods, and before long the discovery of a hand poking up from the earth is found. It's then followed by the body that goes with it, and by that time someone has taken off with their one and only means off of the island, and they're trapped with someone or something that doesn't want them to leave, at least alive. I know I say this often, or more often than maybe I should, for such a big praise, but this was so Moorish. It was so easy to fall into the story and devour large chunks of it at a time, and it really helped that the characters were super memorable, for better or for worse. In fact, I didn't realise it was possible to care so much for a character that was completely off page, like it wasn't even an active participant in this story, and that was Nate. I absolutely loved Nate. In tone, for a large portion of Hemlock Island, it reminded me of Scooby-Doo mysteries. It felt light-hearted, but like there was something always lurking on the very edge of the page, just waiting to come out. And when that darkness did emerge, it got so intense, so like sinister, occult, and there was just so much of a shift that I was like, oh my god, okay, this is happening. I really liked both aspects of the novel's delivery. I think it blended quite nicely. Fair bit of lines overused though, and this is something that did kind of limit my enjoyment a bit. Aside from like the overuse of phrases and lines, we also had things like character tropes that just was annoying. For example, like this savior complex that Lainey seemed to have, and she always seemed to be the one that to spot something and then getting into dangerous situations just to curb her curiosity. Like, it didn't make sense. Learn from your mistake at least once or twice and then don't do it again, especially given the situation that you're in, right? It was irritating from a character growth perspective, but from a reading point of view, it just led to scenes feeling repetitive and stale on occasions. There are definitely some components that I think could have been edited, some which of course I've just outlined there, but for the most part this was a really enjoyable story. It was super spooky, kind of giving off haunted house, old entity type horror archetypes that I typically love, and which was delivered really well. And overall I ended up giving that one a 3.5 out of 5 stars. So the last book I read was another graphic novel, and this was Girl Mode by Magdalene Visaggio, and I gave it a 2 out of 5 stars. So the story follows Phoebe Zito, or Zito, I'm not too sure I pronounced the surname, whose last thing that she wants is to be noticed. She's the newest kid at Sally Ride High School, newly arrived in LA and also newly transitioned. She's trying to just blend in while she figures out exactly who she is, but with her mum checked out and her dad still adjusting to having a daughter, no guidebook on how to be a girl, that's not going to be easy. This was unexpectedly questionable. There was such a disconnect for what I think was the intention for this story to be and what we actually got. I get the message was probably something about, you know, defining your own self, making girlhood whatever you want it to be, but there was just so many twisted conversations in this that I fear it could give the wrong ideas. The only saving grace really was the honest relationship with this surfer girl that Phoebe made friends with, and also the artsy kid sister, and also the gorgeous art style was beautiful as well. It just felt weird. There was also like the slur word for lesbians, the D slur word. It was just used multiple times in a way that was never like combated. There was never any reason for it, and there's never a reason to use a slur, but when I say that I mean there was no conversation of what do you mean by that. Like, there was no challenging. That's it. There was no challenging of the use. And I believe the author is lesbian, and I get that some people want to use slurs to kind of reclaim the word and make it more positive in that way. But the way it was used was not, it wasn't like that. It was used in a way of hatred and like belittling and being nasty, and it just was never challenged, and it felt weird. I don't really know when it hit me, but there was definitely a turning point whilst reading this when I was just like, everything felt wrong and badly handled, unfortunately. So yeah, sorry to end on a bit of a bummer note, but those were all the books that I read during June. Let me know what you've been reading. I hope you've had a fantastic month in life, in love, in health and wealth and reading and hobbies and everything like that. And I shall catch you in another video soon. Bye.